Good afternoon. My name is Paul Lynch. I'm an anesthesiologist and pain management doctor, and I know many of you have been following me the last few months as I've kind of chronicled my own experience with COVID, treating patients and then contracting it. I've been doing weekly videos, and usually with my videos, I'll go over the data for that week. On today's video, I'm going to try to spend most of my time talking about the concept of should we reopen our schools. Many people have reached out to me and asked me if I could address this topic, and I've kind of held off. And one reason is I wasn't really quite sure what we should do. And now we're 2 or 3 months into other countries around the world that have started to open, and we have more and more data. And I think it's becoming more clear that we can open as long as we're following some guidelines and some rules. And so what I want to do today is I want to jump in and talk about, if we are going to open, how do we do it safely? How do we keep the kids safe? How do we keep the teachers safe? How do we keep society safe? And so I want to go through 5 teaching points today, and I'm going to review them for you, and then I'm going to go through them. Number 1 is how to decide if your community is ready to reopen. Number 2 is, if you're going to reopen, the concept of all people aren't the same. So I've talked about the 3 groups before. I'm going to review those again and how it would affect school reopening. 3, I'm going to talk about who the kids go home to. 4, I'm going to actually get into a little bit of the nitty gritty of what are some things that they've tried in other countries around the world, what's worked, what hasn't, and how can we do it here in the United States. And then finally, I just want to kind of hover up and talk about accepting the fact that rates are probably going to go up a little bit when we reopen, and just kind of accepting that as society, which is going to be a tough part of the video, and just the ethics of it. So let's start off with, when can we open? And I've really waited on doing this video. There's been lots of guidance from the CDC and the WHO, basically saying, when I say the WHO, I don't mean the band, by the way. Basically saying that not every country, not every state, not every city is the same, and we need some sort of metrics. And so probably the big 4 metrics that you should be looking at to decide whether it's time for you to reopen your schools is the total number of cases, the total number of hospitalizations, the total number of deaths, and then the last one is one that we've been talking a lot about the last month or so, which is the amount of percent positives that come back. So the amount of people that are tested that come back positive. And that's actually a really good metric to determine how widely you're testing and how widely you're controlling the coronavirus in your community. And so I would recommend you look at those 4 things. For example, I'm in Arizona, and we have probably the highest positive case rate in the country right now. We're still around 25% every day. And so most scientists would say that Arizona is not ready to open, and we're not. We've pushed the date back a couple of weeks, and it's possible we might need to push that back a couple more weeks. But we'll need to track these data, and once the cases are coming down and hospitalizations are coming down and the percent positive, by the way, that's not adding together serology tests and PCR tests. It's just PCR tests as a standalone. When that percent starts coming down, then it makes it easier to reopen. The second concept I want to talk about is the 3 groups, and you've heard me talk about this all the time, but I like to talk about group 1 is people less than 45 years of age with no comorbidities. Group 2 is people 45 to 64, maybe moderate comorbidities like hypertension. And group 3, this is the group we really need to protect, is age 65 and older or significant medical conditions. And so the thing that I want to say is I think we all need to start having honest conversations about how to open schools. But if we're going to do that, we need to realize that all people are not the same. A child who's 9 years old is going to be really, really low risk, and their 72-year-old teacher with heart disease and maybe a lung condition is really high risk. So how do we come up with a program that bridges the needs of the 9-year-old child who's low risk and the 72-year-old who's high risk? And that's kind of what I want to get into a little bit today. I'm going to pause here for a second and just say that I would say that I was very biased against opening schools the entire summer. Anybody who's my friend and gets to talk to me more than just these videos, if you ask me, I would say, oh, we can't open schools right now. It's going to be terrible. It'll accelerate this pandemic. As I researched for this video this week, it's kind of changed my mind. And not just this week, the American Academy of Pediatrics came out with a position statement saying we need to reopen schools, and that got my attention. And then the CDC came out with a statement saying we need to reopen schools. There's a beautiful article published in Science last week that really dove into what other countries have done. And I'm going to post some of these things below so you can read it. These things started to change my mind that there's an entire generation of children that could be affected by this. And so it's kind of started to change my mind that I do think we could open safely. But the key is, how do we do it safely? How do we really critically think through this issue? And that's some of the stuff I want to get to today. I'm certainly not going to give you all the best ideas on how to open schools today in one video, but I want to start the conversation that we can open, and we can open in a safe way, but only if we're really smart about it. So that comes back to my 3 groups. What's best for the child who's low risk is not necessarily what's best for the teacher. So that's kind of a catch-22, right? There's going to be issues where the teachers want to live, right? They're not being selfish. They don't want to die. They don't want to go to school and get a disease that has a 10 or 15% chance of killing them. But the parents of the child in group 1, they want their child to be educated and have a future. And so both sides have things that really make a lot of sense. And so why don't we sit down and try to come up with something that makes sense for both? And so I'm going to get into that in just a second. But first I want to hit my 3rd point, which is think about these 3 groups, but also think about who they go home to. So let's say a 9-year-old child with no comorbidities who's healthy, they're very, very low risk, they're in group 1. And let's say that 9-year-old child has a 32-year-old mother who's also really healthy, and a 33-year-old father who's really healthy. And that's the only people they're coming into contact with. It's really safe for that child to go to school and then come home and interact with their parents. But let's say that child comes home and is being watched by a 7-year-old grandmother who maybe had cancer and is on chemotherapeutic agents. Well, now it doesn't make a ton of sense for that child to go to school and then come home and be watched by someone who's in group 3. And so we have to have really nuanced approaches to this, and we need to have options. That's going to be one of my main things that I talk about below is optionality, where not every child, not every teacher is treated the same. So with that as a background, that's a long background, right? I want to talk a little bit about what are some strategies, what are other countries around the world doing? And so I'm going to put a link below to the Science article that I read last week. It's really awesome. They talk about what do they do in Israel, what do they do in Finland, what do they do in Denmark, what do they do in Germany. And there's a lot more if you guys want to read more about this, but I'm going to put a link below. Let's talk about what's being done around the world. This first one actually is my idea. I didn't see this in the article, but it's something I've been talking about. First of all, a teacher who is in group 3, no one should be twisting their arm to come back and teach, and no one should be firing them or furloughing them or forcing them to retire. So one of the ideas that I would like to put out there is I think we could hire proctors, someone who is in group 1, someone who necessarily doesn't have a teaching background, but could literally just set up a TV, a television, like a closed circuit, TV experience, as I used to say when I was a kid, and a really good experienced teacher who might be in group 3, who has risk factors, could just teach from home. I think that's totally appropriate. We're not talking about for the next 10 years. We're talking about maybe 6 to 12 more months that we're going to be dealing with this, and then we're going to get this under control, is what all the experts are saying. And so a teacher, I think, should be allowed to teach from home while the children can come in. It's so important that the children can come and interact and have these human experiences and learn in person. They could have a proctor in the room that maybe they make $20 an hour and their job is just to set it up, or maybe $15 an hour. I don't really know the numbers, but their job is to set up the TV, be a bit of a babysitter for the children, and then the experienced teacher does that from the safety of their own home. So that's one of the ideas. Another idea, which is being done around the world, is a hybrid model. Not every child has to come in. Limiting class size makes a ton of sense. And so if before there were 30 kids in a class, it probably makes more sense to have 15 in a class. Well, how are we going to do that? Well, one way to do that is to have a hybrid model. Have some kids that are at home, maybe half the day they're at home and they're doing school by computer, and half the day they come in. And I know it's difficult, and parents will start asking questions like, I've got a job and I don't have childcare. I don't have all those answers today. I'm just going to throw out some ideas that schools can use, but limiting class size is another way. If you want to have all the kids go to school at the same time and you want to limit class size, one thing you can do is think about the space that you're no longer using, like the gymnasium. Probably not going to be playing basketball right now or other contact sports. It just, the risk reward's not there. So you could take the gymnasium and break it up into pods. You could take teachers' offices that maybe aren't there. Maybe the teachers are at home where it's a safer environment. You could take their offices. One thing they did in Germany and also in Denmark and a few other countries is they have this concept of pods, where anywhere from honestly as small as 6 to 10 kids and they're able to interact. Maybe they can even play together without social distancing, but they can't come into interaction with anybody else. And so the smaller you can make these pods, the better. One thing they did in Germany is they have pods of 10, and you will only come into contact with 10 other people when you go to school. And if anyone got sick in that pod, then everyone had to stay home for 2 weeks, but not the entire school. So you might have a school of 500, but if one person in the pod of 10 got sick, then those 10 got quarantined, but not the entire 500. It would be devastating if every single time a child got sick, that the entire school had to shut down. And so we need to think about this concept of smaller groups and smaller class sizes. Well, then parents a lot ask me, well, does my kid have to wear a mask when they go to school? The answer is probably yes. It's interesting. There's a lot of countries started with masks, and then over time they abandoned them, and the data is kind of mixed. A few cases do look like when they stopped wearing masks because they were more likely to get sick. But in other places they've done okay. But keep in mind, the places they did okay were generally places like Taiwan, where there wasn't a whole lot of community spread. I'm in Arizona right now. Probably 15 to 20% of people walking around have COVID right now in Arizona. So it's harder to get away with not wearing masks. So probably the children need to wear masks at a certain level or age. They're just too young. They're not going to follow it. But probably 7 and older for sure will wear a mask. Maybe 5 and older. I put up a picture of my daughter at 4 wearing a mask, and she has no problem with it. But probably you need to wear a mask. Schools need to invest in Purell and hand sanitizers so the kids can do that. We do need to really focus on socially distancing. That's probably 6 feet still. So, previously there was a class of 30. I think we could try a class of 15 and spread them out. And then we just need to think a little bit about what to do with the excess time. Like, what do we do over lunch? Different countries have tried different things. China, for example, lunch is the only time of day where they get to take their mask off, but then they eat kind of in a bit of a quarantined area. And so we're all going to need to experiment a little bit. One thing I really want to make clear, I'm doing my best to summarize kind of what's known right now, but we're going to know so much more in a couple of months as we start to open. One of the criticisms I've seen on social media is, well, doctors are always changing their mind. But guys, that is the scientific process. We don't always know. This is a new disease we've never dealt with. And if we open all of our schools in August and September and October, we're going to have a ton of data by November and December. And that's not always good. Like, we'd like to have all that now, but we just don't know. So these recommendations will change over time. I promise you that. But definitely washing your hands, wearing a mask, and socially distancing still seem to be 3 big things that make sense. Do we need to screen our kids? Probably just for temperature at the beginning of every day. Screening a child makes sense. That's super easy, but I don't think we need to be testing every child for COVID every day with like a PCR test. It'd be very, very hard to pull that off, and it'd be uncomfortable for the children as well. Another thing I wanted to tell you guys is utilize outdoors. A lot of countries have done this, and I've been preaching it for a long time. Outdoors is safe. The virus will dissipate very, very quickly in the air. It doesn't linger very long outdoors. And so there's actually very few cases where we can track it, where people are catching it outdoors. So we should be really utilizing outdoors. That's one of the, the easiest way to cut down to smaller class sizes is use the space around the schools and learn outdoors. Maybe it's not what teachers are used to or what schools are used to, but it makes a ton of sense if you're trying to stop the spread of this disease. And then I said it before, but I just want to reiterate, playing contact sports right now in elementary school or high school doesn't make a ton of sense. It's just extra risk with not a ton of reward. And so I would say try to focus on non-contact sports where you can socially distance. So I know I'm biased, but golf is a great one that just is not going to expose people to much risk. You're outdoors. Tennis is a great one that you can do. I think even baseball you could do. You would just need to kind of eliminate the dugout scenario and try to spread the kids out. Whatever you're doing, what I would recommend to people is think outside the box, be creative, and get these basic concepts, which is if you can distance out a little bit, if you can reduce the amount of people that you have contact with, if you wash your hands a lot, and if you're constantly looking for disease, and then if you find someone who's sick to separate them, you're gonna stop the spread. So the last point that I wanna make, my point number 5, and hopefully this was helpful for you guys, but point number 5 is just the concept that this disease is with us and it's here to stay for a while. We're working on a vaccine. We're gonna probably bring that to market sometime next year. Probably sometime in 2021, most people are gonna have access to a vaccine. That'll be a game changer. But until then, we gotta do everything we can to limit this virus just ravaging through the community. So can we just willy-nilly open all of our schools everywhere? No. That's the point of my video is, if we're gonna do this, we're doing it because we think it's right for the kids. We think it's right for the next generation to be educated and to grow up with opportunities. But we need to be safe and we need to be careful. And we probably need to acknowledge that no matter what we do, opening schools is going to be worse for the spread of disease than not opening schools. But the decisions we make and how we open can mitigate the spread to where it doesn't have as big of an impact. And so I would say that I have got on board with the concept that we can open safely, but it's going to take a ton of brainstorming and work between teachers and parents and government. And I will just say, I spend very little of my time criticizing, but I'm not seeing those kind of conversations happening right now. I'm seeing a lot of arguing, a lot of fighting. I'm not seeing rational, thoughtful conversations about how do we do this safely. And that's what I would encourage is let's start the conversation about how we can do it safely. It's the right thing to do for our kids. It's the right thing to do for society. God bless you guys. Stay safe. If you have questions, please feel free to put them below. As usual, feel free to share if you think one of your friends needs to see this. I'll be praying for you guys. Pray for me too.